Survivor Heroes vs Villains, Gamechangers, All-Stars, Cambodia, Micronesia, and finally, Survivor Caramoan, but I can't use the cast, which in this series is really the, oh no, anyway, of Survivor casting. Most of the community can agree this abomination isn't A-tier casting. The fans tribe had about 2 actual fans, and the favourites tribe was a complete mess. So let's change that, and also feel free to write your own dream cast in the comments down below. The female favourites had some of the most lopsided casting, from individuals like Brenda that, yeah, were worthy returnees, and then a literal first boot. So they seem like a good place to start. Natalie Bolton has been tossed around as a casting option in many of these videos, but I feel the season she would be the most viable returnee on comes from Caramoan. The Eric blindside was still a massive deal, Micronesia was still a semi-recent season, and Natalie had a fantastic story as the last standing fan. As you'll quickly realise in this video, I picked individuals that were big parts of their season with notable moments. So Natalie is someone the casuals can remember as a Black Widow while being adored by the superfan community. On the topic of being adored, I also placed Shambo onto the cast because she yet again has been another individual the Survivor community has been desperately wanting a return from. If it hasn't been obvious by now, I do have to state this is my dream cast for this video because people like Shambo have been asked back by production before and have refused. I still tried to make a semi-realistic cast, but I did take some liberties, particularly with the fans tribe, because I couldn't use any of the original contestants. Back to Shambo. I mean, this woman is prehistoric Debbie. She didn't know chickens could frickin' fly, and in Samoa she had an unorthodox, yet weirdly satisfying heroic arc. Considering how much madness Shambo got into in just one season, a Shambo 2.0 is too good to pass up. While a potentially controversial casting pick, I added Ashley Underwood. Now, Ashley was a part of the Ome Let's Let Rob Win tribe and contributed to one of the most boring pagongings in all of Survivor. I get it. But in Ashley's defense, it was a relatively advantageous strategy for her, considering if she gets to the end, even against Rob, after season reports indicate the jury could have gave her the win. Without Philip, Andrea and Francesca to pick, as well as Rob due to him being a winner and prior returnee, Ashley was the best Redemption Island fit in my opinion. Plus she is pretty underrated in the social as well as physical game, and strategically she isn't bad. Sabrina is a fun, snarky and pretty decent strategic personality to buff up the female favourites even more. We can't have Kim due to her being a winner, and while she didn't have the dominance of Miss Spradlin, I feel Sabrina is a well-rounded TV personality. At the end of the day, I don't want this to be an entire cast of pure game bots, but people that can make good confessionals and play the game hard. Sabrina, for me, accomplishes those 2 goals. Now yes, she is also a runner-up, but both the original Micronesia and Caramoan cast had final tribal attendees, with Philip also being a fellow second place finisher, so she's worthy of the favourite slot. On the topic of the original fans versus favourite seasons, both casts had at least one individual from the season directly beforehand. James, Amanda and Malcolm, however, were massive presences of their season, and while I would have loved to have Malcolm on this cast, again, I'm not allowed to cast him. So I picked someone who is just as big of a presence in Survivor Philippines, in Abby Maria. For nitpickers, yes, Abby is technically a returnee, as she came back for season 31, and the favourites can only have played once. But considering we're also essentially going through the time-space continuum to make this cast canon, at this time Abby played only on Survivor Philippines, and that's it. So even if a contestant returns post-Caramoan in the likes of Blood vs Water, Cambodia or Gamechangers, they're all post-Caramoan, and casting people that return for them are fine. Abby had a rivalry with about 90% of the cast in season 25, and that's not even an exaggeration. She was known as a Brazilian dragon willing to spew flames on anyone. This on top of her endgame underdog run, weirdly good strategic reads and pure chaos lands her solidly on the favourites. Plus she smashed a coconut over Michael Scoopin's head. Considering what he's done post-Survivor, if anything, that should probably boon Abby's returning chances even more. A quick shout out to the females I did consider to be on the favourites tribe, such as Alexis, Erin, Holly, Chelsea and RC. You didn't make the final cut, but you gave my final 5 a good run for their money. Now onto the male favourites, and because we're on the recent seasons, let's go to our first man with the shortest Survivor layoff in Jim Rice. Much like the original Caramoan, I picked between seasons 16 to 25, just to keep the casting pool consistent. Most of the male returnees on my cast, interestingly, are from the older seasons, and I did have to make some tough cuts which I'll get into in a moment. With Dawn and Cochrane featuring on Caramoan, Aussie's returnee status alongside Keith and Whitney being largely purple, Jim was the only real Survivor to choose. In fact, considering all 3 of Sophie, Coach and Brandon are out of contention, I didn't have that many South Pacific options apart from Jim. Jim was a big part of the South Pacific pre-merge, playing really hard to ensure he had a power position. While he feels to get on the likes of Cambodia, and potentially nowadays this season is too far back for the casuals to remember him, I feel he had a fantastic opportunity in Caramoan to be viable for a cast. Moreover, Jim has been dying for a second chance on the show, and you know he is going to fully embrace a second appearance. The only other male favourite post-season 20 is Marty. This man fits the hyper-strategic plus wacky confessional giver all in one. Since he'll be returning in season 26, this also means we provide some nice age diversity to the cast, with him being 50. However, this was the biggest issue in casting him, because he was directly competing against Troyzan for this one slot. The two were so similar, I couldn't put both on the cast, but since I had no Nicaragua representation, but I had one world representation in Sabrina, it allowed Marty to edge his opponent out. I'd love to see Marty back again, however. He has some really ballsy plays in Nicaragua, albeit the strategic thinking was questionable. Oh, and who can forget him convincing others he beat a fake chess champion. Someone who is almost a champion again is Steven. He is the second runner-up on this cast and the only Tocantins representative. Again, I wanted to pick others from Tocantins, but considering several contestants have returned, on top of the merge numbers being so small, he was the only one that really stood out. Also now it's probably important for me to say, this entire favourites tribe made the merge. I know there have been precedent for pre-merge boots being on the favourites tribe like Francesca, but I personally feel to be classed as a favourite, you've had to make it a considerable distance within the game. That being said, if I were to pick pre-merge candidates, I would consider Stephanie Valencia, Ace and Tyrone. Now, Steven did return for Cambodia like Abby, but again that's after Caramoan, and I feel Steven would play just as hard with a cast like this. But Steven really does have the perfect story for the return. He was a part of one of the smallest minorities coming into the merge, and while strategic, was beaten by one of the most dominant winners at the time. Following him is Kenny, and yes, Kenny doesn't want to play again, but I feel he would be a really unique returnee for this season. Again, Kenny is the only form of Gabon representation, and while not as outspoken as Corinne, he did have a very fascinating arc. This man was the prehistoric Chris A, going from quirky underdog hero to cocky villain that sometimes overplayed his hand. If nothing else convinces you about Kenny being a favourite, he was pretty much the only person on Gabon that befriended Michelle Chase. I mean, that's gotta count as some feat, right? While Kenny is a bit more of a forgettable figure now, Caramoan was only 4 years after Gabon, and Kenny was regarded by the community as one of the bigger strategic forces in season 17. Although that's not saying much. On the opposite end of the spectrum, our final male favourite is Jason. Much like Natalie, Jason is another individual who previously was a fan on Micronesia, then turned into a favourite. So while some people may argue they filled the same slot, the two come into the season on completely opposite ends of the spectrum. Natalie enjoyed the good life as a widow, while Jason couldn't catch a break. Since I can't cast Eric due to him being on the initial cast, Jason filled the role of having an iconic blunder and believing Aussie's fake immunity idol, creating one of the best Survivor moments ever in It's Just an Effing Stick. Jason has probably one of the best storylines coming into a season like this, plus Natalie and him in Micronesia had a sibling-esque rivalry, so it'd be fun to see those two together again. For my male favourites, I considered the aforementioned Troyzan, Mike, David, Maddie and Albert. In fact, Albert was originally going to be the last male favourite, but I talked with my good pal A Galaxy Wolf, and he brought up Jason, which I felt was an even better fit. On the topic of finding the right fit, now we're on to the fans tribe, and if I manage to make a worse fan tribes than this, that's honestly an achievement. The Caramoan fans tribe is a bit of a laughingstock in the community because so few people on that tribe were actually fans of the game, but I tried to cast people that were fans of the game and also would play really hard. For the fans, I'll be casting up to Millennials vs Generation X, which might sound like a lot, but it's only 5 seasons with Blood vs Water and Cambodia essentially being out of the running. I felt this was fair because several of these individuals likely would have been in the casting pool around this time. However, I also tried to match this tribe up age and physicality wise with my favourite tribe to prevent one tribe steamrolling the other in challenges. Exemplifying this is Jay Starrett, matching up to Jason well physically, as they're both strong guys in their mid-20s, with Jay being about 22 to 23 at this season's filming. I also made sure the contestants' ages fit, even when going back to season 26, so contestants like Julia from Co Wrong can't be considered because she literally would have been 16. No thank you. But Jay is a lively, enjoyable presence that in season 33 was adored by both the superfans as well as the casuals, and I don't think this perspective would have been different a few years earlier. Jay knows how to play the game aggressively, and if he finds an idol in this timeline, at least we get his glorious recount of the Survivor theme song. Next is Bryce, who presents an interesting perspective. For my favourite tribe, I picked only people who made the merge because I felt to have the notoriety of the term, you should have lasted about half of the initial game. Since all these fans are being picked before their actual season, I can pick whoever, and Bryce is an example of that. Despite only being a third boot in Cagayan, Bryce has been a massive part of the community and has participated in the likes of events or other Survivor games. Considering he's such a household name despite being a third boot, really shows his love with Survivor, and hopefully on a bigger tribe with lots of fans like him, he can make a deeper run. After that is fellow Cagayan beauty LJ. He's a triple threat in the game, knows how to find idols, and was only bested by Tony Vlachos, which, considering he's now a 2-time winner, is not a huge knock. On the topic of Tony, I decided not to put any eventual winners on this tribe because I felt it made the video very predictable. However, if I were to cast with winners, then yes, I would be putting all 5 of Tony Vlachos, Natalie Anderson, Jeremy Collins, Michelle Fitzgerald and Adam Klein, and probably even a 6th in Sarah Lucena. Making half your tribe winners kind of sucked the fun out of this video, and at least means I get to cast more underrated figures like LJ. While I excluded winners, I can always pick some of the runners-up, with one being Tai Trang. This man is already one of the most unique individuals in Survivor history, making him such an appealing pick on a cast like this. He's shown he has a knack for finding idols, is probably one of the most charming Survivor contestants ever, and will flip on a dime if he needs to. Tai adds some nice age diversity onto the cast, while consistently showing he can make deep runs, even against other Survivor legends. The final great addition to the fans tribe is David Wright. Now David is a returnee, but again, it's post-Caramoan, so it doesn't matter. David exudes massive superfan energy, which is quite rare for his older male archetype. I mean, this is the man in MVGX that ran around the entire island looking for the idol right as they landed, and then played that idol to save Jessica in one of the best pre-merge idol plays. That's the kind of superfan I want. Someone that makes great TV but is also all about the experience. The male fans were very hard to cast due to how stacked the field was, but my group of 5 displays the diversity and fan energy I want. Moreover, age and strength wise, I think they stack up against the favourites well. Other considerations were Spencer, Josh and Reed, Drew, John, Cal Jason, Zeke and Joe. Last but certainly not least are the females, beginning with a little bit of spice and chaos cast. This woman makes a great basis on the women's side of things, whether she's quarrelling with half the cast similar to Cagayan or abusing swing positions. Cass is entertainment guaranteed. It'll also be extremely fun to see both her and Abby Maria together on a swap tribe or at the merge. While representation of individuals in their 40s is great, I wanted to add on to that with another person in their 50s. While we already have Marty on the favourites, it's true, for the fans I decided on Carolyn. For me, Carolyn is a really interesting casting pick, as although she's one of the oldest contestants on the cast, she's proven to be extremely capable in challenges. Add on to that her aggressive gameplay style, for someone particularly in the quote-unquote mum archetype, and I think she's a shoo-in. There is every possibility she could end up being a pre-merge boot like in her initial game, but it's extremely hard to pass up on the infamous Kelly Wentworth. She matches up against her counterpart Ashley physically and age-wise extremely well. On top of that, as we've seen in her future appearances, Wentworth can play from the top, bottom or middle effectively. So with that all considered, plus her superfan status, I had to pick her. Yeah, she did have a disappointing return in Cambodia, but I still give Shireen the green light for this Caramoan cast. Shireen, without a doubt, displayed the most superfan energy I've ever seen. And worlds apart, even halfway through the game, she was still geeking out, and if nothing else, she deserves cross-dimensional compensation for how people treated her in Season 30. Last but certainly not least is a representative for women in their 30s on the fan tribe with Jessica Lewis. While perhaps not the biggest presence by herself on Season 33, Jessica was a defining part of the Paul Blind side, as well as David's Majority Alliance. She then went on to find the first ever legacy advantage, and who can forget that insane rock draw that caused her to be the 3rd person ever rocked out of Survivor. For me, Jessica filled in a lot of the last few holes on the cast and rounded it out well. That being said, I did have lots of female fan considerations in Aubrey, Figgy, Michaela, So, Nadia, Alexis and Tasha, that with a couple of adjustments could have definitely been viable on a fans versus favourites cast as well. That's the end of the video however, and here's the cast in its entirety, but let me know yours in the comments. On screen now is a video that involved over 150,000 votes to determine the best winner that you should check out. And peace!